has a hard-on.
Perfect world was a dream which primitive cerebral.
He's a traitor! He's a sadist!
You're all going to die down here.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
Welcome with kindness and love to Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, an initiation by conversation into the dark corners of myth, magic, and meaning. A crash course in cult, culture, and conspiracy. A virtuous virus invoking and informing history, holiness, and heresy. Each week, I commandeer your connection to bring the most accepted and rejected scholars and provocateurs to your attention. Fun, compelling, and deeply weird, this show is the blow-your-mind cocktail party conversation you always wanted to listen in on. To be inspired to resurrect your inner artist and indwelling inventor and innermost performer. To eradicate and do better than the creator gods and their insipid realities.
Slugs! He created slugs! Are we not in the hands of a lunatic?
Like Harold Bloom said, the central dictum of the Gnostics was and always will be. That which can be broken must be. Or as Hermann Hesse said in Damien, the bird fights its way out of the egg. The egg is the world. Who would be born must first destroy a world. The bird flies to God. The God's name is Abraxas. I am Abraxas, and so are you. And together, we're going to craft better worlds now. But first, let us destroy this present world.
You clearly don't know who you're talking to, so let me clue you in. I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger.
Adding to the show's ethos, among all this creation and destruction, let us not forget the words of Oscar Wilde, who said, "We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at stars." So let us also look at stars together while creating those better worlds.
Disorder, chaos, anarchy. Now that's fun.
On this approximately August 30th, the year of our Demiurge 2014, we continue with a series of political shows with razor blade hunger and mind-slashing claws that began a few weeks ago with our episode with Mark Gaffney on Gnostic Secrets of the Nascenes. Our astral guest now at the virtual Alexandria is a lofty and brilliant truth seeker warrior who takes the monkey form of Robert Bonomo. He is the author of several excellent novels, including his newest one, Love Incomplete. His blog, The Cactus Land, provides some of the best modern esoterica you'll get this side of the dangling left nutsack of Atlas. We will be discussing Gnosticism and Anarchism, and why they are brothers of each other, and perhaps the only alternative for seekers of Sophia today.
They are dismantling the sleeping middle class. More and more people are becoming poor. We are their cattle. We are being bred for slavery.
For more information on Robert and his starry articles, please visit thecactusland.com. Why are we getting political on Aeon Byte? Because it's getting dark and boring and pathetic out there. Because the Archons are coming in for the kill as humanity is rejecting their false wars and false economies and false flags and circle jerk realities. Bringing in Hermann Hesse again, this Gnostic also said in his novel Damien, "You knew all along that your sanctioned world was only half the world, and you tried to suppress the second half the way the priests and teachers do. You won't succeed. No one succeeds in this once he has begun to think."
Are you a clergyman or just a PR man?
When you come right down to it, Mr. Carter, is there any difference?
Yes, the Archons know that we know we are living in Gnostic times, in a Philip K. Dick world, resembling Roman times around the time that hologram went up. It's a time when paranoia and conspiracy theory sensibility and full frontal skepticism and existentialist geek angst are actually assets. When self-knowledge can be weaponized for mystic victory. Yet a time of rumors of wars in distant lands instigated by silent politicians, and religious openness like never before, but simultaneously with rising fundamentalism like a clubbing dick slap.
What the hell happened to us? What happened to the American dream?
It came true! You're looking at it.
Where the rich get richer while wearing their togas of eugenics, and the middle class gets cornholed into oblivion, while the powerless get nose and soul bleed seats in virtual circuses, and are fed bread soaked in aspartame, where saviors are nailed with rubber bullets, and philosophers squabble about the demise of gods, even as gods descend in flying saucers, or take the form of tyrannical tech gurus. It's a time of paradox, and nostalgia, and anxiety, and deep, deep alienation. It's a time of deserts of the real.
What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage. Born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
Oh, it's certainly eerily like Roman times, as Hans Jonas and other scholars advance, before the Dark Ages began. And the Dark Ages will return unless we continue to shove red pill suppositories up our rectums of perception on this show, and find the gnosis to be completely liberated from the wrathful lullaby of Jehovah and his angelic mafia. These are Gnostic times, and only the Gnostics are the solution. The empire never ended.
Our impulses are being redirected. We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep.
Choose Republican or Democrat, Israel or Palestine, cops or activists, Chick-fil-A or tofu, Apple or Google, and so forth, and so many false choices. Like Thomas Pynchon said, if they can get you asking the wrong questions, they don't have to worry about answers. And like Carl Jung said, the devil is a dualist. He's forever trying to make two out of one. And yes, I'm certainly a dualist.
I am the devil.
But that's the key, because like the ancient Gnostics, I can actually see false dichotomies. Unlike non-dualists and New Agers who think everything is God, including child porn, Ebola viruses, beheaded journalists, and Maroon 5. They're so easily manipulated into fragmentation and buy into the counterfeit spirit, instead of seeing existence as it is. Jungian binaries meant to be balanced and transcended, into the vast nothingness of self-knowledge and dark wisdom and ecstatic individuation.
By the power of truth, I, while living, have conquered the universe.
Like the Gospel of Thomas says, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. And that kind of gets in the way of destroying worlds, methinks. So instead, bring out your infernal artists, bring out your inner Kali, as Harold Bloom wanted, and bring out your indwelling Dionysus and Prometheus. Let us destroy this world while looking at stars. Create not worlds, but new universes of light.
The life you know, all the stuff that you take for granted, it's not gonna last.
What about good and evil, some may ask? The only good that is worthy is the eradication of ignorance and the love of the downtrodden. Everything else takes care of itself. Like Philip K. Dick said, the true measure of a man is not his intelligence or how high he rises in this freak establishment. No, the true measure of a man is this: how quickly can he respond to the needs of others, and how much of himself he can give. No single thing abides. All things are fucked up. A man is an angel that has gone deranged.
You cannot play God, then wash your hands of the things that you've created. Sooner or later, the day comes when you can't hide from the things that you've done anymore.
Getting back to why we're being political and the ongoing theme of destruction, I think Martin Luther put it well when he said, "We are under one roof, but the house is on fire." We might as well help burn down the house of the Lord, already on fire. As Harold Bloom and as well Hermann Hesse advise, we'll do this in Gnosis and Anarchism, with the fire of reason and passion and creativity. As Jesus said, pretending to be the Joker in the Gospel of Thomas, I have come to cast fire upon the world, and see, I watch over it until it blazes. And like the Gnostic book of Jehu says, fire, though divided, suffers no loss. It may pass from candle to candle and grow in number, while remaining one from the source. So are you finally ready to be the fire cast by Jesus?
A new age has begun. An age of freedom.
Please support Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio in any way you can. A few shekels here and there. Any assistance you might have, like marketing, design, or finding a way to abort any new Star Wars movies. Please don't forget to support my Patreon campaign, where you donate every time I produce. Just visit patreon.com/AeonByte, AEONBYTE, or check out the banner at the website.
That's now. In an hour, he could have total recall.
Your support is essential, and much appreciation to you nomadic pyromaniacs who support this red pill volcano on a weekly basis. And don't forget my books like Voices of Gnosticism, Stargazer, Heretic, and The Executioner's Daughter. All of them pure napalm gnosis. We're going to do so many wonders together. I just know it. And we will make a difference soon as we start asking the right questions.
I am not a number. I am a free man.
But enough of my drivel. Let us to the interview with the erudite and sapient Robert Bonomo. These are Gnostic times. a Philip K. Dick world. The house is on fire. Let us make it burn harder. Let us watch stars together. I'm with you the whole way. Hello and goodbye as always.
If you could be either God's worst enemy or nothing, which would you choose? We're the middle children of history. We have no special purpose or place, and unless we get God's attention, we have no hope of damnation or redemption. Which is worse, hell or nothing? Burn the museums. Wipe your ass with the Mona Lisa. This way, at least God will know your name.
This is the Aeon Byte interview, and we definitely have the pleasure of having with us Robert Bonomo to discuss several of his works and his writings, including his latest novel, Your Love Incomplete. How are you doing today, Robert?
Oh, really well. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, well, thank you very much for being on the show. Well, first tell us about yourself and your past, briefly, specifically about how you came into the esoteric paths.
Yeah, I would say that the esoteric path for me began in adolescence. As a teenager, I had one of those really big dreams. You know? Jung talks about that, how sometimes in adolescent you get these sort of dreams that mark you. And I had one that was just very big, very apocalyptic. And it really kind of changed the way I saw the world. And another experience I had that was really potent was with psilocybin mushrooms. As a teenager, taking mushrooms, I had an absolutely astounding enlightenment experience. And I didn't really understand what it was till years later I got involved with Zen. And reading about Zen and the enlightenment experience, I realized I'd already had one without having sat in a temple and meditating for years. Kind of a Terence McKenna sort of experience. No? So, and I didn't know who Terence McKenna was till I was 40. So... Go figure. No?
And that led you into being a writer and other things, right?
Absolutely. That dream is what really. After that dream, I said this has to be written at some point. So I wrote a couple of novels first to sort of break in, and then my novel Cactus Land is based on that dream. The end of that dream is the novel. So yeah, the dream pushed me towards writing. And it all kind of went from there.
Oh, I agree, and it's interesting synchronicity. I was just having a debate on one of my pages about Terence McKenna, and I was talking about how my experience many years ago was with the ayahuasca, DMT, and how I, for the first time, saw Abraxas, and it showed I saw the vision of Abraxas, and it made me, it created the show we're listening to, for better or worse. So it's interesting, but it's also very frustrating because you kind of wish you could get this vision every day to sort of support your path or your destiny, but like me, you really have to hold on to that because you don't know when your daemon or these other entities are actually going to talk to you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a bit of frustration with that. But as I've gotten older, I also don't feel like I want to go back to that. No, I think it's something that happens. It brings you there. I'm not sure it's such a great idea to keep trying to going back and finding it again. It's sort of, it brings you to a place, and then from that place you have to keep moving, no? But I really think that what Terence talked about in that area makes so much sense. Why spend 25 years meditating, looking at a wall, when you can get this in 10 minutes with DMT, right?
Oh, I agree, but of course there's always dangers. And again, Sure. It's a synchronicity with the discussion I'm having today, because in our society, we want things now. So we do get dependent on pills. And I've always told people, if you want to do entheogens or so forth, make sure you do it in a controlled environment, maybe ritualistic, with people who know what they're doing. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's really important. And nowadays, the great thing is you can find legal. You can travel and find people who are professionals who know what they're doing. But I think you would kind of agree we're a little bit more old school. And my experience certainly was just out of the blue, completely out of the blue. which gives it another dimension too. No, when you're 17 and someone hands you a bag of something, what's this? What? And 3 hours later, you're enlightened. It's truly bizarre. No. Yeah, I agree. People should be careful.
Yeah, and of course, I think what you're saying, you're enlightened. You're not really enlightened. You start on the path. It was Aldous Huxley who said, an idiot doing acid is still an idiot doing acid. You still have to do the work after that.
Absolutely. And it took me, I can say this, if that happened when I was 16 or 17, I really didn't come to terms with it till I was maybe 40. So it took at least 20-something years to really understand it. Absolutely. Yeah, I was nowhere near enlightened. But for those moments in that experience, it was an enlightenment experience, but you're not enlightened.
Yeah. Again, we want what we want. We in this Twitter society, we want it now and we want to get it over with. But we continue on the path. So tell us, Robert, in keeping with the theme of the show, in your view, who were the Gnostics and what is their legacy in history, or at least what is their legacy in your life?
Yeah, and this is a topic that for me has been kind of difficult, I guess, because for me, finding Gnosticism, and for me, a lot of it had to do with Stefan Heller. When I really got into Gnosticism, when I discovered Stefan Heller and his lectures and his work, for me, it was really important. And then later you hear people like Elaine Pagels and other very important academics who I have a lot of respect for say, well, there really isn't a Gnosticism. For me, it's clear. When something's Gnostic, I think it's that idea that the God that we were brought up with, i.e. the God of the Bible, Yahweh, whoever, is not a benevolent character. That, for me, is that gives the flavor to Gnosticism, at least in my experience. And I think the second thing is the Sophia idea of Sophia being lost in this material world and rescuing her. And for example, in alchemy, that idea of the massa confusa and the elixir and removing that spark from the material realm. Those two concepts for me, if a movement has those two concepts or something close to it, it's Gnostic. But the first one I think is crucial because that's the one that kind of connects us to the anarchism also. Well,
and like I tell people, you can take Gnosticism in a philosophical, literary, or any other way, that idea of what the Gnostics were to you. You don't have to. It doesn't end with just rejecting the Old Testament and so forth, and that can really help in your path. I mean, as we talk, wouldn't you say that we do live in very Gnostic times today?
Oh, I think absolutely, incredibly. And I think what's happened in the last 10 years or so, or 10 or 15 years, has been incredibly Gnostic. For example, the 1990s, something was cooking in the 1990s, but I don't think I didn't have that feel. No, it was a different time, no? But from 2001 on, I think we're in incredibly Gnostic times.
And I guess for the listener, they might want to know what exactly are Gnostic times. I always tell people, read Hans Jonas, The Gnostic Religion, which shows eerie parallels with the Roman times and how the Roman times were. And today we live in a time of where people are realizing that most of our realities are false, that they're shadowy archons feeding on us, whether it's the government or UFOs or even our parents. And we have a desperate need to look inward instead of at worldly solutions. Am I right to say this?
I think completely. And I think you'd see an enormous difference. I was born in the late 60s, brought up in the 70s and 80s, and it was pretty rare to encounter people who just completely denied history, denied the myths around their country. And today you just see so many people, and I think every day more, people who just stopped believing the big myths. They just don't believe they're true.
Yeah, even such concepts as patriotism and so forth. I mean, people would question them in the 60s and 70s, but they were in the minority and it didn't last. Today, it's almost like we have the chance, if we don't get too divided and conquered or splintered because of the internet, but we can and we can't stand up. Being paranoid or having a conspiracy theory sensibility is no longer a bad thing, a crazy thing like people accuse the Gnostics of, right?
Yeah, exactly. And even in the 60s, I mean, I remember, for the example, the anti-war movement, in a sense, was almost patriotic. A lot of the people who were in that movement felt like what was going on in Vietnam was wrong. It was anti-American. But now people just don't even believe in the American concept. We're speaking from an American point of view. They don't even believe in that concept anymore. And I think that's a big difference. Because it's not like, oh, if we went back to a different time, or the Second World War was the good war, or I think a lot of people now just don't believe history. There were no good wars. It was all a lie. And that's a different mentality, I think.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree with you. And your writings are very thought and soul-provoking. One of them is your article in your blog, The Cactus Land, entitled The 7 Pillars of the Matrix. Could you tell us about it, Robert?
Yeah, sure. I'm also an astrologer, and I spent maybe the last 6 or 7 years studying astrology. Just recently, I've started doing charts for people, sort of on a semi-professional basis. There's a Gnostic idea, a Neoplatonist idea, and you can maybe help me out in here because you're very well versed in these topics. Also, the Hermeticists had the idea of the soul descending through the spheres of the planets. So if we had, say, a soul, as it materialized, each planet gave it a different flavor. Say, Saturn or Kronos would give it that flavor. It would limit it by time. Maybe Jupiter by government, philosophy, the sun by God. And that was a very old idea. And you saw it in all three of those movements. We have the modern idea of the Matrix, like similar to what was in the film, The Matrix.
Right.
What I tried to do in the article is show how the Matrix, not so much a soul, but the Matrix is constructed by actually being created through the influence of these 7 classical planets. And it took me a long time to write, and there was a lot of thinking going on in it, but it had an interesting response. It was a very, very interesting response. A lot of people liked it, and a lot of people didn't like it.
I don't know how they wouldn't like it. I mean, obviously, it's a powerful, cutting article where you divide the 7 planets in culture, money, circus, religion, patriotism, government, education, and how we're enslaved and brought into faiths that we don't want. What exactly didn't people like about it?
Well, what I did, funny, I have a friend of mine who's also an astrologer, and he accuses me of being an extreme Gemini. I made 2 versions of this article. One for the Mountain Astrologer, which is a really great publication, but mostly for astrologers and people who are very serious in astrology. And it's a very esoteric article. And I made another one because if I get published on a lot of political websites, but if I send them an article, anything that smells of woo-woo, they just won't publish it. So I did a version of the article as political. Mountain Astrologer, they loved it. In some of the political sites, people didn't like it. I think primarily because it cuts pretty coldly into, for example, religion. So a lot of people on political sites might say, yeah, patriotism, that's garbage, but I'm a Methodist, and don't mess with the Bible. So I kind of pushed them a little bit too much, maybe.
Exactly. But I think it's a very powerful article, and of course it ties into the Matrix. It ties into, as you said, the ideas of these ancient heretics of descending into false realities and getting out of these realities. So it's a very good idea. And one thing you do is also you bring up Plato's allegory of the cave, and you show that it's more than just a spiritual lesson, but a political one. Am I right to say this, Robert?
Oh, I think absolutely. And I reread the allegory of the cave before I wrote the article. And I'm not sure if it was before or after, Plato actually talks about one thing that was fascinating on how to choose a leader. So this is very close in the original text to when he begins the allegory of the cave. And I loved what he said. He said, we should pick our leaders from statesmen who have retired, living the contemplative life, and we ask them to come back and lead us. That's how a leader should be chosen. A leader should never be chosen by somebody who wants to be a leader. No. And I was like, wow. Oh yeah, I think Plato, when he was describing this, was describing both sides of it. The political. Now, I think probably more the spiritual side, but there's definitely a political side to this. And when you read the Allegory of the Cave, it's amazing that long ago things were so similar. It's almost like nothing has changed. It's really profound what he says there, that what people are seeing is not reality. They're seeing no shadows on the wall. And in my article, I talk about this. The beginning of the Matrix is language itself. As soon as we begin to refer, imagine before language, when you saw a tree was a tree. A woman was a woman. There was no interference. There was no interference with the words. But now, when we look at a tree, we have the whole idea. The word is there, and then when we think about language becoming books and becoming films and becoming plays, we're constantly being separated from what would be the true experience of actually knowing something. From a Gnostic standpoint, real gnosis. And I think that's what Plato's getting at in the Allegory of the Cave. And the problem is we've gotten so abstracted from that point that we're in an extreme point now.
And it's very interesting because Plato always thought that democracy was the lesser of evils. He thought that the elite should run a country. And of course today when we hear words like the elite and stuff, we think of these, idiot politicians and so forth, rich businessmen who got their money from their families and so forth. But like you said, for him the elite was somebody who, as you said, was retired, was a good person, somebody who the Greeks and the Romans thought was like Cincinnatus, a retired farmer who would come up when needed to lead the country. And Washington based his life on that.
Yeah, I just think it's such an interesting point, because we use this word democracy and it doesn't exist. I mean, let's take American democracy. We'll start wars in other countries because we want to bring them democracy, but we really don't have democracy here. We have two candidates that basically say the same thing. It's like Coke and Pepsi. But people have gotten to the point where they accept that the whole spectrum of possibilities for our society is within the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And it really is like asking somebody, do you want Coke or Pepsi? I mean, I'm not going to go into a political tirade here, but you know what I mean. There's really no difference. Right. And we're going to start wars with countries and tell them that we're going to bring them that's what we're going to bring them, and that's going to liberate them. I mean, we really have reached points where our elite is, I don't know what's going on, but it's a sad state of affairs.
It's bread and circus is what the Gnostics warned about. And I think it reminds me of the quote by Mark Twain that goes, if they thought voting changed anything, they wouldn't let us vote. And I think that's the point. So going to, staying in a bit in politics, you talk about, or we've discussed before, the idea of anarchism and how Gnosticism seems to go hand in hand with it. How is that, Robert? And maybe we could start with anarchism, since the word, like Gnosticism itself, tends to be so loaded and misused today. What exactly is anarchism in its purest form?
Yeah, that's an incredibly difficult question. And God help the person who goes to Wikipedia and begins to read the Wikipedia page. They'll become very confused, because you have anarchists all over the place. No, anarcho-capitalists, anarcho-syndicalists. But what is anarchism from my point of view? It believes that the mechanisms, it's an incredible distrust of all mechanisms of social control. On one hand, that's sort of the negative definition, i.e., the state, corporations, organized religion, all these mechanisms of control they only exist to control us and manipulate us. That on one hand. And on sort of the positive side, it believes that sovereignty comes from the person. States exist, churches exist, corporations exist, because people give up a portion of their sovereignty. And I think those are sort of the two key elements there. Basically, the power is with the people and exists originally in the people.
Yeah, it reminds me of an article that we were discussing Stephen Heller, who you mentioned, who talked about how Hermeticism influenced the founding of the USA because it begins with the divine spark, and the burden of proof of why we give up any light to these archons, to these rulers of the ages, falls upon them. Is that how it is, Robert?
Okay, yeah. Basically, I think what he was talking about with that spark is a little bit it was similar to the sovereignty of the individual, giving the power to governments, to corporations, to banks, militaries, etc. NGOs, world organizations. But I feel like in today's world, most people don't feel that way. They don't feel that responsibility to the government as its keeper. It's the other way around. And once people lose that idea that the government exists because of them, not them because of the government, basically you've given away all your power. You've given away your spark.
And how can somebody responsibly find more about the anarchist movement? What do you suggest to them, Robert?
Well, it really depends on, I would say, where, because I think first it's very important to move beyond the whole partisan idea. Just to give people an idea, I began in the far left. I was sort of an NPR listening New Yorker reader. I'm sure you get the picture.
Right.
And I became disenchanted with the left. And then I really could never embrace the right, so I didn't know where to move. Eventually, I got involved more in anarcho-capitalism, which some people on the left might find not to their taste. If somebody was one interesting place to look is, for example, a site like Lew Rockwell, very sort of Ron Paul anarchism, anarcho-capitalism. If someone feels more comfortable on the left, I think a place like, for example, Counterpunch is a pretty interesting website where you get more of a leftist kind of a feel for anarchism. I'm trying to think. Another site that I like a lot and that you can find people who are very, very into the whole anarchist idea is Zero Hedge. Now, Zero Hedge is a financial site, but you get a lot of folks on there with some very interesting ideas. And I would say 95% of them are post-partisan. You don't find partisan debates on a place like Zero Hedge. And if you look in the comments, you can find some pretty interesting ideas there. It's some pretty hardcore anarchist stuff on that site.
And going back to the 7 pillars of the Matrix, you have again some great lines, some great ideas. I love this line you wrote: "Whoever discovered water certainly wasn't a fish." What does that mean, Robert? I guess basically in the two-party system, it's saying stop being a fish. You got to look outside the system. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so difficult to do. It's extremely difficult because if you think that the world is sort of between those two pillars of, say, right and left in United States politics, you're a fish in water, and how do you get out? It's not easy. I can say myself, I got kicked out in the sense where sometimes I think it's almost like a synchronicity. The circumstances in our life kind of give us a boot, and all of a sudden we wind up outside of the system. No, I think it's extremely difficult. I think have the bravery to question all of your beliefs. If you can have the courage to truly question a belief and accept the possibility that you might have to give it up, that is the beginning. Because if you are unable to jettison the majority of your beliefs, you'll never get out of it. You'll never leave the water.
You also quote scholar Peter Kingsley, who says that scholarship is meant to keep us from the truth instead of find it. What does that mean, Robert?
I think that what that means is he's referring there to academia, and I can give you just an example from my life. I studied history, so I have an undergraduate degree in history. I have a master's in business administration. I worked for a bank. I was a marketing manager for a bank on the marketing end. And through that whole experience, I never once learned what money was or who created it. How can you study the history of the 20th century and not understand money creation and the control of capital? It's like studying an automobile and not knowing what gasoline is. You have absolutely no idea. The Federal Reserve, I did not understand the Federal Reserve System till I was in my mid-40s. I didn't know how a bank created a loan. And I worked for a bank, and I used to go to the director of the bank and say, how are we making any money on this stuff? Oh, when these complicated answers. When I finally figured that out, then I understood a lot about history. So, for example, I really think that most academics in history are not interested in telling us what happened. They're interested in creating myths that we'll accept and myths that will maintain a certain stability in our societies and maintain the mechanisms of social control.
So basically, as they say, follow the money trail, go down the yellow brick road, and you will find the truth, which is basically it's all smoke and mirrors. And again, going back to these Gnostic times, it's all a terrible illusion to keep us enslaved. And was this a process, as people always want, again, certain answers, but the red pill takes a while to go down your throat. So when you were a banker, this was a slow process of knowledge for you to understand and open your eyes and leave this world, right?
Oh, very, very slow. Extremely slow. And I never forget, for example, this would have been, I wrote a very kind of the first article I wrote that kind of took me to the next level. I wrote about on money creation. It was a very popular article. It reached very high levels. It took me years to write that article. I stopped writing and just thought about it for 6 months. I might have been in my mid-40s. 10 years before that, working at the bank, I remember asking, I asked my boss, and she had no idea how to explain to me how we made any money. And then I sat down with the chief financial officer for an oil company who happened to be a friend of mine. And we were having a few beers, and this man was brilliant, a CFO of an a small oil company, but the CFO of an oil company. And I remember watching him shake his head, telling me, I have no idea how they make any money. So just to make a long story short, it takes a long time, yes, for that red pill to get down.
Yeah, and as I often say, it's a jagged little red pill, borrowing from Alanis Morissette. It hurts. It'll give you a sore throat. And you also say you're an astrologist, or
yes.
I know a lot of listeners, and especially the Gnostics who are very anti-fate, would say, how can astrology help us? After all, astrology is just mapping the terrain of fate that enslaves us. Isn't the idea to break away from fate, Robert?
Yes. Interesting way to look at it. I see astrology not so much as fate as cycles, and it's a little bit different to look at it as the study of cycles. Think about the dawn of man. The first cycle, the most important cycle, is the day-night cycle. In astrology, we call it sect. The diurnal, the nocturnal, the masculine, the feminine. Then you have the monthly cycle and the yearly cycle with the seasons. So I think the first humans, I really believe this, the first humans who understood the cycle of the year were probably the most successful, because they could follow when the light started getting shorter. They knew that they needed to go to one area to find animals. When the light was getting longer, they knew they could get fruit. So I don't see astrology as the study of fate as so much the study of cycles of life. And understanding that cycle, there's something almost Taoist to it.
And again, by learning about it, that's how you break free. You have to learn about fate just as you have to learn about how money is made to get it. Knowledge is power, isn't it?
Absolutely, no. And to deny fate, I mean, there's certain things that we can't deny, no? We are going to be born and we are going to die. And we are going to have our ups and downs. Nobody's going to get out of here without some ups and downs. astrology can help you understand a little bit yourself. And a little bit from how I wrote that article, The 7 Pillars, real astrology means transcending your chart. Now, there is a Gnostic idea of beyond the 7 planets and beyond the zodiac, there's Jesus and Sophia waiting. And so if you look at astrology as your chart, not to accept your fate, but to transcend your situation and your particular situation, then it's a little bit different.
And what about this issue, Robert? It seems we live in times of wide religious choices and a growing occult, heterodox populations or movement. But that hasn't really created a revolution. Where do you see the shortcoming in today's esoteric paths? I mean, I, of course, always kind of make fun of New Age because it basically fallen into the same trap as all other religions. It's become materialistic and cheap and marketed. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with this? And what other things do you see wrong with these heterodox movements?
Yeah, I find the whole New Age thing to be absolutely just repugnant.
You just got it.
Like, for example,
okay.
Yeah, like The Secret. No, I mean, I wrote an article on that. You know, how, and The Secret is I've worked in direct marketing many years. I worked in direct marketing, and as a direct marketer, what I would do is first I put words into your mind. And then I manipulate your language, the language you use with yourself. And by manipulating that language, I change your habits. And finally, I change your behavior so you buy my product. In The Secret, that's all The Secret was. The Secret was a brilliant direct marketing tool. I see the problem with the whole esoteric movement. First off, you've got to take the money out of it. And there's just too much money in it. Everybody seems to be trying to make a buck here and a buck there, selling this course, selling that course. There really are where are the monasteries where you go, you give up everything? I mean, why? Those places don't exist. There's no initiation. There's no true esoteric initiation left. We're at the mercy of The Secret. And and we have to find it. And you can't. There are times when you need that initiation. You need elders, people who can really explain things, and we don't have that. Yeah, I think we're all basically lost, and myself included. It's
going back to Plato's retired businessmen as something to come and help us, and the secret is that it's becoming a joke. I mean, I agree with you 100%. And what other shortcomings do you see with a lot of these occult movements?
The other thing I see is the whole guruism. Now, the guruism is just extremely dangerous. And Terence McKenna talks about this a lot, about the problem with gurus. Usually they've got one hand down in your pocket and the other one trying to get down your pants. No, he says that a lot.
With the Beatles, that's a perfect example.
Yeah, you just see it, you just look at it, and you just weep. About the whole guruism. We're in a very difficult spot. Because look at organized religion in the United States, and look at the war in Iraq, for example. I mean, every religious denomination should have been just absolutely up in arms. What are we doing? Killing people in a supposedly country that has a strong Christian tradition. I mean, what is this? Nothing. So I just think that there's everything comes down to social position, money, materialism. We have gone so far to the materialistic side that there's almost no spirit left in this society. Almost nothing. So I have no answers.
No, right now it's just a good time to keep firing those questions, and I think that's what a good anarchist does. He just nails you with questions until these institutions prove their points, and it's very interesting because you were in marketing, and I remember I had Phil Gardner on the show, and he, again, like you, was into marketing, and he decided he would go into esoteric pursuits, just leave it all behind. And the first thing he told me, he said, marketing is not about desire career or good products, the first thing a marketer does is put fear in your heart. Do you agree with this, Robert?
That's a very interesting. It's a very interesting point, and it's brilliant because you can motivate people with fear more than you can motivate them with pleasure. That's a basic marketing tool, you're true. The thing is, I didn't use it so much because I was in the financial side. I was working in a lot of financial products, and for there we're playing with greed, no, and
that's
greed
ripe with
yeah,
ripe with desire.
But there are other products that exactly. No, so I was on the greed end, so I didn't get to play with those kind of toys so much. But I would have loved to, at the height of my marketing career, I would have loved to have been able to work on the fear side. No,
yeah, because after all, people don't realize it's the fear of not having an iPhone or a certain car or a certain house. That's what really moves people to spend money, isn't it?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I never really looked at it that way because I marketed people, get rich quick. That was I was actually a guru in that whole space of learn how to play the stock market or forex markets. Honestly, I never thought about it that way, but it's really true. Because when you sell somebody the lifestyle, what are they really thinking? Is they thinking they want the lifestyle or comparing to their peers? Yeah, you're probably right. That's a really good point.
Yeah, and that's what religions have done to us. The fear of going to hell, the fear of not going to heaven, and so forth. So it's, again, like you said, times haven't changed since Plato was standing around looking at society. It's the same archons, the same mythologies, and so forth. It's it's pretty crazy. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Well, but from your standpoint, I just wanted to see if what you thought. Where do you see the future of sort of all these esoteric movements? I mean, do we have a future?
No. As keeping in mind what I'm always hopeful, but as a Gnostic, I always like to go with the Hellenistic fight to die. I'd rather keep things as pessimistic as possible so that I myself don't lose my spark. I myself don't go into material ways. So that's what you're going to hear me always banging the drum. Yeah, inside I think there's hope, but there's usual worry. I mean, we're talking about the New Age movement, and let's face it, somebody wrote an article how it's really one of the fastest growing industries and movements in the whole country. The problem is that it's amorphous. There's no leadership. But what happens when you finally get one leader to tie it all together, one New Age imam or New Age pope? Guess what we have, Robert? Mm-hmm. The next big religion, the next Jehovah will come with a different clothing. So that's kind of where I stand. I guess I'll always be like you, the little guy in the corner fighting while, coming up when he's retired to do something good.
I have one hope, and I've had the idea, and this is something that's been kind of gnawing at me for about the last year, and I'm thinking about writing an article on this, is that there is a new myth that's being created slowly. It's a myth that began in the late 90s and kind of blossomed around the whole 9/11 period. And it's something connected with the truth movement. And I know this might sound a little too conspiratorial, but just hear me out. The truth movement, basically the truth of the truth movement is that we are living in a matrix and that 9/11 was a rip in the matrix.
Right.
The mistake of the truth movement is looking for it in a material way. They're looking for a smoking gun or a bomb that blew up a building or a plane that didn't exist. And if they go down that material route, they're never going to find it. Because the truth of that whole event wasn't if it was a conspiracy or if it wasn't a conspiracy. It's that this matrix exists and that what we're seeing is a hologram. And that doesn't mean literally a hologram. It's a myth of a hologram. Do you follow me?
Oh, yeah. That's a very, very thought-provoking idea. Yeah.
And I think that there is a religion that is coming out of this. And if you look in pop culture in the 90s, it's really interesting. You have the X-Files. This was something that was enormously popular all over the world, basically saying the government is not telling us the truth. You have the Truman Show, and then the Matrix film comes out in 1999. In June or July of 2001, The Lone Gunman, the first episode, the pilot episode of The Lone Gunman. What happens there? Guys from the government are going to fly a plane into the World Trade Center. Vince Gilligan he said something really interesting. He said when he saw 9/11, he was terrified that what they had done was copied what he had from that film, from that episode. But I think there was something cooking, and I think it's continued to cook, and I think something really powerful could emerge. Joseph Campbell talked about how we need a new myth, that we don't have a myth. Jung talked about a little bit, how the two fish of Pisces and how we're in the second fish of Pisces, and that Aquarian age. But think about the Aquarian age and the religion that talked about the Matrix, which is really almost like a new Gnosticism. So maybe something is cooking. Who knows?
No, I'd have to agree with you on your points. I mean, even in The Matrix, there's a famous scene or controversial scene where Neo pulls out his passport, and the expiration date is September 11th, 2001. So there was there was some sort of powerful synchronistic explosion that happened there. So yeah, I agree with you. So Robert, moving again, this next question is certainly personal to me, and it has to do with another one of your excellent articles, Carl Jung and AA. Tell us about the connection of these two psycho-spiritual streams.
Yes, that was something that's fascinating. I guess a lot of folks don't realize this, but Carl Jung was really created the foundation for Alcoholics Anonymous by, I'll just tell the story quickly. There was a wealthy American who had a very serious drinking problem, went to Switzerland and began treatment with Carl Jung, who was obviously, very elite psychiatrist. And the gentleman had a relapse, and he went to see Jung, told him he had a relapse, and Jung said, "Look, there's nothing I can do for you. I'm sorry, you're lost." And in shock, imagine a very wealthy person who goes to Switzerland just to see Jung and says, "Look, you're wasting my time. I really can't do anything for you." Desperate, he said, what can, there's got to be something. And Jung said, "Well, some people who have a religious experience have gotten over, drinking." The guy went, he had the religious experience, stopped drinking, so on. And basically, his message got to Bill Wilson, who founded Alcoholics Anonymous. So in 1961, Bill Wilson sent a letter to Jung explaining how his treatment of this gentleman was the origin of AA. And I don't believe Jung knew about it. I don't think he had ever made the connection. And it's fascinating that Jung's psychology, which can be very difficult, especially when you think of the later books of Jung, can be very difficult, very abstract. Its nuts and bolts version became AA. And one thing I would like to say about this is, I think if that gentleman had gone to see Freud and had a relapse and had gone back to Freud, Freud would have told him, "Well, you should love and work." And I don't think that man would have ever given up booze if that was the message, love and work, and there'd be no AA. So I think it really goes deep down to the difference between that Freudian outlook and the Jungian outlook,
Oh, I agree with you, and I've had discussions about this. Even people, I go to meetings, I'm saying this right now, people talk about how, like, the second and third step came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity and finding your own higher power. And this in itself is very Jungian, even Gnostic, because it's talking about not so much about salvation, but your own sanity becoming whole, and by finding this through a God image that works for you, because after all, Jung would say, these are all images, and these images lead to a higher state of being. So in that way, it's very, it has Gnostic elements, and of course the whole idea of AA, of being sort of world-denying, of starting a war immediately against your ego, your demiurgic self. Mm-hmm. So don't you see all these things as, very Gnostic, and as you say, very primordial Jungian psychology?
Yeah, it's amazing. And the other thing about AA that is interesting is, what other organization can exist at the level that AA exists? And basically, there's no money involved. Nobody's making any money. I don't think any. How many full-time employees does AA have? No, extremely few, if any. I don't know.
Some in New York.
So it is. So I mean, it is possible to create a movement that has no sort of top end, which is sort of an anarchist dream. I mean, AA is sort of anarchism at work. That's how anarchism should work, in a sense, no?
I think you're right. I think we might have hit on something about, we're talking about how an anarchist movement might work. And of course, there are corrupt AA satellites. I've heard about them and so forth. But like you said, the movement itself remains pristine without really being run by a bunch of anarchists with just a couple of rules and principles. So it's interesting, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot there on that we can take to governance on many other aspects of life.
Yeah, very fascinating stuff, and I hope the listeners are getting a lot out of it, because I know I am. So, Robert, you're also a fiction writer. Could you tell us a bit about your latest novel, Your Love Incomplete, and some of its more esoteric themes?
Yeah, sure. It's a novel, I would say, of enlightenment, of escaping the matrix, and it talks about it's a journey. Now, it really is profoundly esoteric. It has 22 chapters that follow the major arcana of the tarot, and it's important to understand that the major arcana of the tarot it is a path. It describes a spiritual journey, and the book follows that journey. And inside the book, very important elements are Gnosticism and Anarchism. Astrology is very important in this book. There's a little bit of Terence McKenna in it, but I think it's for people who are interested in how do you escape the matrix. This book can give you one sort of version of how it's possible.
Great, and just without giving too much away, what is the plot, Robert?
Yeah, we have somebody reaching middle age who's living on the West Coast, working in internet startups, and becomes obsessed with conspiracy theories, just obsessed with conspiracy theories, and lives kind of a lonely life, obsessed with conspiracy theories. And somebody from his father's past comes into his life, and the story moves this character, say, to New York, where they work. You see the sort of the world of the internet, the world of the matrix, and this person would be a technocrat of the matrix, just manipulating people left and right, completely corrupt. And a Sophianic kind of female grabs hold of him and kind of spins him around in not such a friendly way, and sort of tosses him out of the matrix, and he stays out. And it moves off. There's a sort of a very Russian flavor to the end of the novel, and I think for folks, it's on Smashwords. It's a free download, and I encourage people to give it a read.
I certainly would do that too. And to end, Robert, what advice do you have for both budding writers and seekers of higher consciousness? Struggling in this world of forms, in this matrix. Seems the advice would overlap, right? Wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you as a writer, I think this will make sense to you. As a writer, the most important thing a writer needs to do is find his voice. And I think the first 500,000 words, maybe the first 1,000,000 words, who knows, are just for the recycle bin. You're just writing and writing and writing and trying to find that voice. And when you eventually find it, you stop imitating. It's like a singer. When young singers imitate, and when a singer becomes a real singer, they stop imitating, they just sing. And when you have that voice as a writer, you can write anything you want. As on the spiritual path, I would say imitation is very similar to believing. As William James talks about, if you have faith in someone else's spiritual experience, you believe, you have faith, but gnosis is knowing, and gnosis is like a writer with his own voice, and that's where I think the two intersect.
Oh, I would agree with you, and whatever happens is It's irrelevant. Find your voice, find your spark, let it shine, and damn the torpedoes. And then we have two little guys like you and I screaming in the corner at the world. Maybe somebody will listen to our drivel. And maybe we both work for the Archons. That's one of the things. Have you ever wondered? I say, maybe all this stuff, I'll turn around and there'll be a man behind the curtain say, hey, thanks for advocating and pushing my orthodox agenda. You ever wonder about that, Robert? Like, you could be fooled even when you're outside the Matrix.
Oh yeah. Many times I wonder what the heck am I doing? No, absolutely. But you have to fight on, and look, I have a lot of faith in the sense of, as long as I'm more aware, as long as I feel like I'm on the path of more and more consciousness, more and more awareness, it really doesn't matter where I am now, as long as it gets more and more. No? So. You just got to believe that the light's going to get brighter and brighter.
Oh yeah, because it reminds me of there's one Gnostic text called Marsanis, and of course the Gnostics talked about going through up and levels. And this guy finds out there's a God above God, which I write about, and then he realizes, has a vision, says, "Oh no, there's a God above God above God." It just doesn't end. Or some theories that say when Neo took the red pill and woke up. There was still another matrix. The whole trilogy happens within an even larger matrix that you have to get out. So we got to keep fighting on, right?
Exactly.
Well, Robert, I think that's all the time we have today. I'd like to thank you very much for coming on Aeon Byte and giving us a very stimulating and anarchist discussion.
Thank you very much for having me on. I really enjoyed it.